All right, let's get into it. We usually think of medicine as, well, just chemistry and prescriptions, right? But today, we're going to look at it a little differently, more like a military campaign. We are decoding the actual battle plan for fighting one of our oldest enemies, fungus.
And this right here, this is our source material. Now, I know, at first glance, it just looks like a page of really complex notes. But trust me, this is our map. It lays out all the strategies, the different weapons, and the key targets in the war against fungal infections.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? That's what we're here to figure out. We're going to break this whole plan down so we can understand the enemy, the fungal cell itself, and check out the super clever strategies we've come up with to take it down.
So, right off the bat, here is the main problem, the biggest challenge. Fungal cells are what we call eukaryotics, which is exactly what our own cells are. This makes them a really tricky enemy because, any weapon we design to attack them could easily cause friendly fire, hurting our own bodies. So selective targeting is absolutely everything.
Okay, so our first strategy is just a direct brute force attack. It's all about finding a weak spot in the enemy's defenses and just hitting it as hard as possible. Let's see how it works.
The key weakness, the chink in the armor, is this stuff called ergosterol. I want you to think of it like the special kind of metal that a fungus uses to make its armor, which is its cell membrane. Now here's the important part. Our cells don't use ergosterol. We use cholesterol. And that little difference, that's our target.
And here's the attack plan in action. The drugs that do this are called polyenes. They basically act like little molecular magnets. They find that ergosterol armor, they lock onto it, and then they literally rip holes in the membrane. All the important stuff inside, like potassium, just leaks right out, and the fungal cell, well, it basically bleeds to death.
Yeah, this is the heavy artillery. The main weapon here is a drug called amphotericin B. It's so powerful it's sometimes called amphoterrible because of its side effects. But it's the weapon you bring in for the most serious life-threatening infections because it is fungicidal. That's a fancy word that just means it doesn't mess around. It directly kills the fungus.
But brute force isn't always the answer. So our next strategy is a lot more subtle. Instead of punching holes in the armor that's already there, what if we could just sabotage the supply lines and stop the armor from ever being built at all?
So with this approach, the target is completely different. We're not aiming for the armor anymore. Now we're aiming for the factory that makes it. To be specific, we're targeting this one crucial enzyme. You can just think of it as the master factory worker that the fungus absolutely needs to produce ergosterol.
The drugs for this job, the azoles, are like industrial saboteurs. They sneak inside the fungus and they just shut that key factory worker down. So production of new armor grinds to a halt, and even worse for the fungus, a bunch of toxic junk starts to build up instead. The result isn't always a quick kill. A lot of times it just weakens the fungus and stops it from growing, an effect we call fungus static.
And the azole team is a whole crew of specialists. You can see right here in the battle plan, you don't send the same agent on every mission. So for example, fluconazole is your go-to for common stuff like Candida. But for a really dangerous enemy like Aspergillus, you've got to call in a specialist like voriconazole. It's all about picking the right operative for the job.
Okay, so we've punched holes in the armor. We've sabotaged the supply lines. Our third strategy, this one might be the most elegant of them all. It targets a structure that the fungus has, but we don't have at all.
And that structure is the cell wall. It's built out of this unique material called beta-1,3-glucan. Just think of this as the actual bricks and mortar that give the fungus its strength and its shape. And since our cells don't have a wall, and definitely no beta-1,3-glucan, this is an unbelievably specific and safe target for us.
The drugs for this mission are the echinocandins, and they're like molecular demolition experts. They go in and they block the enzyme that makes the bricks, so the fungus can't build or even repair its wall. And without that rigid support, well, the cell just becomes unstable and collapses in on itself.
So these are our wall breakers. They're super effective. They're cidal, or killing, against Candida. They're more static against Aspergillus. But the best part is, because they target something so unique to fungi, they're one of the safest classes of antifungals in our entire arsenal.
Now, beyond these three main armies, our battle plan also includes a couple of what I like to call special operatives, drugs that are designed for very, very specific missions.
Yeah, let's dive back into our source notes here, because you can see there are a few more entries. These aren't the big armies we send in for systemic infections. No, think of these guys as the special ops, built for really precise, often localized missions. Let's meet a couple of them.
Okay, so first up is turbinifying. It also messes with armor production, kind of like the azoles, but it hits the supply line way earlier. This causes a nasty toxic buildup of something called squalene. Then you've got griseofulvin, which has a totally different mission. It actually gets into our skin and nails, and it physically stops the fungus from dividing and spreading. It's an amazing weapon for things like ringworm.
So, let's pull back for a second and just look at the whole arsenal we've put together. When you see it all laid out, it's a really impressive and diverse set of strategies. So just to recap our 5 main battle plans, we can punch holes directly in the membrane, we can sabotage armor production, we can demolish the cell wall, we can poison the fungus with its own supply buildup, or we can just stop it from dividing. Every single strategy exploits a totally unique weakness.
And really, this is the big takeaway here. Why does all this matter? Well, because no single strategy works for every single enemy or in every single situation. Having this diverse arsenal means we can pick exactly the right weapon for the right fight. We can minimize harm to the patient and maximize our chances of winning.
But of course, this war is never really over. Fungi are smart. They're always evolving, always developing resistance to even our best weapons. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question. What new targets, what new clever strategies will the next generation of battle plans have to come up with?